Something unusual is taking shape in Washington right now, and it isn't being driven by Democrats. For the first time, Republicans are pushing back against Donald Trump. Quietly, deliberately, they're moving to block the authority he's trying to consolidate at any cost. Emergency language, war-style rhetoric, behind-the-scenes anxiety. Congress is stepping in to draw a line. This isn't just another political clash or a fleeting headline. It's a test of whether American power is ruled by law or by one man's instincts. Stay with me, because what's unfolding could reshape how power works in the United States long after the headlines fade. Picture Washington late at night. Phones lighting up across Capitol Hill, aides whispering in hallways, senators double-checking their screens to make sure what they're reading is real. The President of the United States is furious, not at Democrats, not at the media, but at his own party. And for the first time in years, the resistance isn't coming from outside the gates. It's coming from inside the walls. That's where real danger begins. Republicans are turning against Donald Trump. And this isn't routine MAGA infighting or anonymous leaks meant to scare donors. This is deeper and far more serious because it targets the one thing Trump believes he cannot survive without: unchecked power. This revolt isn't just about broken promises, though those exist, from vows of no new wars to rising living costs to long-promised disclosures that never arrive. What makes this moment different is that Republican lawmakers themselves are openly moving to block the authority Trump is desperate to protect. And when internal guardrails activate, presidents don't respond calmly. They escalate, they dramatize, they declare emergencies. That's exactly what we're seeing now. A presidency leaning into spectacle and crisis language to shield itself from internal collapse. At the center of this backlash is a reality so alarming that even seasoned Washington veterans hesitate to say it out loud. The President of the United States has publicly entertained the use of military force in ways that could drag America into conflict, not with distant enemies, but with its own allies. When Senator Chris Murphy laid this out bluntly, it landed like a shockwave. Strip away the bluster and branding, and you're left with a scenario that sounds absurd until you remember we're no longer allowed to dismiss these statements as jokes. Greenland isn't empty real estate. It's part of Denmark. Denmark is a NATO ally. Any military action there isn't symbolic. It's a legal and strategic nightmare that could place the United States in direct conflict with Europe. The fact that lawmakers now have to seriously explain this shows how unmoored the conversation has become. No one voted for a presidency that risks conflict with allies over acquisition rhetoric. Yet here we are, parsing hypotheticals while members of Trump's own party quietly but firmly try to shut the door before it gets kicked open. To understand the backlash, you have to understand Trump's worldview. He doesn't see geopolitics as alliances or treaties. He sees leverage, property, and deals that can be forced. That mindset might work in a boardroom. In global politics, it gets people killed. Republican senators know this. They understand that once military action is framed as an option, the machinery begins moving, whether Congress approves or not. That's why the War Powers Act suddenly became the battlefield, not as theory, but as an emergency brake. And when Republicans joined Democrats to pull it, Trump didn't respond with persuasion. He responded with anger, threats, and profanity. Because that's what happens when someone who believes power is personal realizes it's conditional. The reported call to Senator Susan Collins wasn't about one vote. It was about discovering that loyalty has limits. For Trump, that resistance feels existential. His entire strategy depends on projecting dominance and control. Nothing undermines that faster than your own party publicly saying no, especially when the stakes involve war and constitutional limits. Faced with pushback, Trump doesn't retreat. He reframes. He reaches for emergency language, declaring extraordinary measures as political weapons. The national emergency tied to Venezuelan oil fits the pattern perfectly. It allows him to pose as the sole protector of national security while painting dissent as obstruction, even though the reality involves long timelines, corporate interests, and uncertain benefits for ordinary Americans. But complexity has never been the point. The point is dominance, distraction, and control of the narrative. Emergencies change the rules. They centralize authority. They shift attention away from uncomfortable questions. And few questions are more uncomfortable right now than why transparency promises stalled, why document releases lagged, and why bipartisan pressure was needed to move oversight forward. When lawmakers begin openly discussing inspectors general, compliance failures, and missed timelines, it signals concern about process, not conclusions. That concern is exactly what Trump cannot afford. His political survival depends on flooding the zone, exhausting the public, and forcing every controversy to compete for attention. These threads, Republican resistance, war powers, emergency declarations, stalled disclosures, aren't separate stories. They're the same story from different angles. A presidency trying to outrun accountability by accelerating chaos. And Republicans who once stayed silent are now weighing the cost of that silence, realizing that inaction itself becomes consent. Once a president openly suggests he answers only to personal judgment, not law or precedent, the issue stops being partisan. It becomes structural. Behind closed doors, Republicans are asking whether stopping Trump is betrayal or preservation. History doesn't remember who shouted the loudest. It remembers who stepped in when the rules bent too far. This revolt, quiet in some places and explosive in others, is the first real test of the internal guardrails. Not by the opposition, but by those who understand how dangerous unchecked power becomes when wrapped in grievance and permanent emergency language. Behind the cameras and social media outrage, GOP lawmakers are quietly acknowledging they're no longer dealing with a conventional presidency. They're dealing with a leader who treats every institutional limit as a personal insult. That realization is changing behavior in ways that would have seemed impossible a year ago. When the War Powers Resolution advanced with Republican votes, it wasn't accidental. It was calculated. Senators understand that once unilateral military threats become normalized, Congress becomes irrelevant unless it reasserts itself. Trump's response only deepened concern that his decision-making is driven by impulse, grievance, and obsession with legacy. That obsession now collides with reality. Wars aren't abstractions to voters. They're costs and consequences. Republicans up for re-election know no branding can sell conflict with allies as a win. Emergency powers feel less like leadership and more like panic. As scrutiny tightens, Trump widens the narrative. Emergencies, external threats, distraction, flood the zone, and hope attention moves on. But Congress isn't an audience. It's a co-equal branch. And some lawmakers are starting to act like it again. This moment feels heavier than past controversies because it's no longer about what Trump says. It's about what he can't control. Oversight accumulates, records persist, deadlines don't forget. That's why this matters. Not one vote or one declaration, but a reckoning over whether institutions still function when pressure comes from the top. Resistance is no longer ideological, it's institutional, it's procedural. Republicans know today's shortcuts become tomorrow's precedents. That realization has turned quiet unease into cautious action. Votes for restraint, oversight as necessity, distance as self-preservation. The temptation is to treat this as just another political drama. That misses the point. The real question is whether the rules governing power are still stronger than the people temporarily holding it. That answer will shape not just this presidency, but every one that follows.